Okay, that's gonna have to do. Okay. So, ooh, yeah. Okay, so okay, so people have some questions and they wanted to know. So it helps me to stay organized if I go in order. Okay, so the very first question was I spoken for? So as an entrepreneur and a business owner and as a young lady, I've had relationships that have not really equated to people say, yeah, you know, so and so claims so and so. I've never really had that. I didn't go that route. So if you had asked me then, I definitely may have had some reservations about any and everything when it came to dealing with that type of question. But now, as I've gotten older and I've matured and I figured some things out on my own and kind of sort of grew a little bit here into who I am, who you all see. And so that took quite a bit of some time. That's a journey, that's a process. And so the particular question starts not as it appears with the ones that may not have really resonated as something that was needed specifically for anything that was supposed to have gone for a certain route when it comes to delivery claiming. So to answer that question takes some effort. And everybody's not willing to put in the certain effort. And that was weird. I was just saying this the other day. If I'm in the process and somebody comes along and they get to witness and see what the process is, but they don't get to see it and process it on their own without doing some work when it's really a vibe there. And it's not for everybody. And that's why it is a bit of effort. And so the question was I spoken for? And so if you're curious as to what that kind of sort of is for explanation, so there has been different times and spaces and spans where people assumed, you know, that they know what's best for you. They assume that they just got a certain way, like they just know. And you know, I'm not a biggie on assumptions. So when I go to church, which I attend is Providence Baptist Church, you know, our preacher, his name is Pastor Mayton, that's our pastor. And he's always telling us that, you know, we are kind of erring when we go off assumptions. And so people have assumed that I've been in relationships with people who just love me to death, I guess. And I go into depth in these if you're curious. Hi, hello, hello. Into some of the links that you can find on YouTube. But this particular question, this still fits. And I guess people just think that that's the right thing to do. They assume that a certain behavior, I guess, is going to equate to me thinking that you and I are a couple. And that's not true. You know, I've been on different dates that were kind of fun. They weren't like the worst of the worst, but I would still never say yes to that particular answer with those entities either. I know one guy, we were going out, and then all of a sudden, yeah, no, I'm going to go ahead on and see somebody else. And okay, cool. So, you know, you can't really answer the question that are you spoken for with someone like that as an example? You know what I mean? Y'all wouldn't trust me. And I wouldn't really want to be bothered with something like that anyway, because I just realized as well, courtship is also how you figure out the intent in the end is not to just go to speak to somebody else. You know, that's not what it is. And I also had moments where somebody, here's another example as to why, and they'll say certain things out and about. Let's say you're dating. Some girls want princess treatment, so they don't pay for anything, or they constantly want big gifts. So it just depends on who you're dating and what your end goal is. And so if they're saying something like, okay, so we go out and we do this, whose responsibility is this now? And then that's another issue. So I'm not going to be the rushing to say, oh, yeah, I'm not going to do that either. And then you have instances where you're constantly probably going to be, what you have to do is to be whoever that is based off whatever's going on, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. As females, you kind of sort of have to learn that independence is going to help you. Because as a young woman, you know, you the boss of you, nobody else. So when they act this way, again, you're not going to answer that question, are you spoken for, with an example like that either. So a true example is what you have to give, look for, resonate with, allow yourself to experience, to let that into your life, and keep everything else at arm's distance. And arm distance is kind of sort of like a weeding out. And that's from our Brand Spaces owner's father. His name is Ronnie R. Moore. And so that's what the points are. And I don't mind being in relationships, but they have to be not like those, not constantly taking or giving or based off assumptions. I don't West Coast Cruise 20s. And I don't feel like, I don't believe in that as a experience of being something that's truly spoken for. That's like a user, or somebody that just wants clout, or just to be out and about with a pretty thing or handsome thing or something like that. It doesn't really answer your question truthfully. So when we get to the truthful pieces, there was always a person that I admired from a very young age. And I mean, so if anybody doesn't know, as an entrepreneur, I'm not from originally Ohio. Originally, I am from a southern state, which is Dallas, Texas, which also means the original spot of personality creation is not in Ohio, it's in Plano. Plano is a state that's in the suburb of Dallas, Texas. And so after that incident took place, we ended up being here in Ohio. That's where I came across an entity that I've never really gotten over. And ever since, people will come into place, sadly, but necessarily, so to speak, that's just how you have to answer this question. And so, and particularly speaking, that's why assumptions are assumptions, okay? Because we assume we know something about somebody else's life, and usually it's their personal life. And then we risk looking a certain way because we act off assumption and not honesty. Honesty is always what I'm encouraging you all to understand how to scale based off practicing honesty. It's like integrity. So people can trust you enough to want to be able to go back and forth and build rapport. That's really, 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 I've learned rapport is really a great asset. People want to kind of sort of quickly just brush it aside, but I don't encourage you all to do that. Build a rapport with people, get to know them, figure them out. And I'm always trying to encourage you all to do these things. That's why I keep suggesting some of those links. Read about these instances and don't always just want to go to the next live or the next instances. I'm only doing this particular live because I put questions out. I saw somebody doing a question and I said, maybe I'll try something similar. So this is the only reason why this is here. But this particular entity that we never had a moment to really express our in particular spoken for capabilities at that particular point in time. But that's not to say that there was never a desire to necessarily make whatever thoughts come into fruition either. I'm not going to say that. I don't believe that's accurate. And that's just not something that I'm willing to say just off bat in hindsight. That's not intelligent. And so people assume when you get into these relationships that you have to be like the blonde dame, the blonde that's dumb, like the trope of the dumb blonde. Like in order to keep a guy in your presence, you have to belittle yourself. You have to make you less shrunken so that they can be more profound. That's not someone that I'm willing to claim as someone. I am claiming as a person that, yeah, you claiming so and so, and they make you feel 10 feet tall, 3 feet high. Like, no, I don't need to inflate your ego. I don't need to boost your ego. I don't need no one to make my ego feel smaller than what it actually is. Just to have somebody say and claim me and that you're the person, because I'm so desperate. So I'll settle for that and claim you as the person that is the one that I'm just also spoken for. Like, I don't see how that's bringing harmony to anybody, to all of us. How? It's not. So when I am spoken for someone, there's mutual understanding there that we've always had these feelings. And by the time they actually were manifested, it took years and years and years and years. And now people are going to assume automatically that years are something that means that the relationship was stressed or that the relationship was negative because it didn't happen, lickety split, so to speak, as you may have heard before. But again, when people are in a real live rush to express that they are trying to win your heart so quickly, and lo and behold, what happens to relationships? They fall through, they crumble, they disintegrate, they become old news, they become yesterday's lunch. So eventually it spoils and rottens, and you have to eventually throw it out. That's the answer as to what do you have to eventually do with things that spoil you. You get rid of them. It's like salt that's no longer salty. It's to be thrown out and trampled upon underneath the foot of men and women. That's all that you do. So when you say that things take longer to express, that's not always something that people need to jump on a bandwagon as being necessarily something that's a bad thing. That means that something is evil because it took 10,000 different years to do. No, Jesus has been gone for all of these years and we still speak his name to this very day. So you can't really say that and then still feel as though you're being an authentic entity. That just doesn't make sense. So when I say that I'm spoken for, I mean for years on end. So people just assume that you're in relationships with someone, right? And then they just think that that's just what it is. And it's never as it appears. I could be spoken for from someone for all of these years, and then the whole entire time it's a person that's always thinking something else, and then that's how we get ourselves into trouble. Because people don't really take being spoken for. They were just saying this on 107.9 the other day. Like, a girl didn't know that she was pregnant, and the guy ended up testing, and it wasn't the person she thought it was, but she did something silly to the little entity that she was carrying anyway, and then she turned out ended up regretting it, and then she ended up dying, so she wasn't able to even fix it. And she really had nothing even to worry about in the first place to begin with. That's what we do. How can you be involved in entities with other individuals and have any doubts about something? And it's not a solid relationship because it's never as it appears. And people are so unwilling to accept this. And that's probably why they always are ending up settling or in relationships that truly are a misfit. And misfits, can you imagine being in a misfitted relationship? It's like wearing a shoe that's 2 sizes too small for like 10 years. Your foot eventually becomes deformed and disfigured. So you're not even going to be the same person that you were. And so let's say, for an example, you can't really function too well without necessarily, so to speak, having something that makes you a little like I don't know, more, I don't know, inclined to do something that's appropriate for what it is that you have going on. Then why are you in that relationship? Why are you spoken for with this type of entity in person? Okay, so either you're going to be weak-minded, which Alexa speaks on this quite often. So you're weak in your mind and your thought processes. You're settling for just anybody. And you're risking your dreams going by because you refuse to accept what you truly want. And instead you're settling for the lesser thing that's like a dupe of what you want and calling it contentment. And that's where people get into that whole trend. Y'all saying it, y'all know what I'm about to say. A whole trend of just going down the rabbit hole of against being contented. You see what I mean? Because we tricked in ourselves. So I'm glad that this is still here, but this has been something that's really been like in the back of my mind, like people had those moments and there's like retrospect and they're thinking about things. So the back of my own mind, this is really one of the top instances there. And I don't really think it's, I mean, just to be frank, it's not really nothing else at this point. So I'm grateful for that. So I'm glad that he asked this question that I answered it to the best of my own said abilities. Okay, all right. So if anybody wants to know, yeah, that's been a long time now. It's been many obstacles. I spoke on this for a few other lives before. And if not, I think it's coming up on love within like the next few weeks. And this is the main example, stems from a similar experience as this question. This comes from one of my followers on IG, who I ended up following. I thought that it was a social thing. I ended up running across somebody that was similar, and I just assumed that they were kind of sort of like that. So I decided to act upon that. So that's where some of these connections and rapport are built. So, question number two. Question number two was, do you believe in God? I think it was. Um, so, um, oh, well, yeah, of course I believe in God. I mean, I just quoted some. I had to think about, like, wait a minute, how am I going to actually really back this thing up? So now that I have the answer, so the question is, did I actually believe in God? And answer that may surprise people is that yes, I believe in God. I've always believed in God. I never believed in sex before marriage. I always considered something that was sinful, so I never really was in a rush to just accept any old type of thing from anybody. And these are some of the reasons why God has necessarily craft. And so if we are even created, let's say, in the image that has to do with the way that God sees us as his children, and as a young daughter of God, even if people assume that it's just so dark, because sometimes life is. Sometimes life can be daunting, especially in those moments of settling. And so, as a believer of Christ and Jesus, now I believe in Christianity. People are curious enough about if I'm Christian or not and things of that nature. And my religion is Christianity. And so, yes, I go to church. I've been Christian, baptized, and I have my daughter Christian and things of that nature. And so I've always desired to have a really close relationship with God. And I say with God, not because somebody else was doing it, which is nice to be around other people who act similarly. But how often is that? I was at Nordy one day and we were getting ready to have some kind of meeting, probably like the fifth or sixth meeting in a row. And by the time we were going there and getting ready to do every little thing, we were all late. Nobody, well, we were there, but the people who were holding it were late. No, they weren't showing up. And then they didn't step up to be there on time and welcome us in. We had to wait around, kind of sort of on certain floors. And so it was just taking way longer than what was normal. And so just mind you, be aware and notice these type of behaviors. And so, of course, by the time the things, well, I shouldn't say of course, but so that just lets you know, that's your cue, that's your signs that by the time that things are really there, that they're getting ready to go ahead on and try to do whatever at this particular point was a hot mess. And so that goes to show you, as I take a second and just say, okay, thank you, Lord, for the food that we about to go ahead on and do for this particular event, and that we're getting ready to do, watch over it as we take it for the nourishment of our bodies. And at the same time and token, did you see anybody else do that? So do you believe in God? Yes, I believe. And do you? But I definitely believed enough to go ahead on and say whatever I wanted to have said so that I can eat these things in peace. Now, did everybody else do those things? I'm glad that y'all understand that you can kind of see the differences there. I'm really grateful for that you are able to do those things, because I'm sure that there are content who are less than that type of level are able to even kind of sort of resonate. Like, I don't even know if they have been able to have created something. So I'm to even just be able to behave that way. It's a shame. And I can tell that y'all don't even want to even be bothered with even asking that type of entity, because I'm so similar. Like, it's so odd because you don't do anything like that. There's no question about figuring it out. There's nothing there that even helps you kind of sort of do another thing. It's just constantly like changing, so it always goes against the grain of actually answering the question honestly, as if you actually do believe in God. And so when you see those instances, it's really interesting to see. I know for myself, I believe in God so much so where I'm constantly like, oh, okay, well, you think that, you making me an enemy. You think that you're doing something kind of foul to me. You think that I'm your reason behind, I don't know, God's gift to man for whatever reason. And, you thinking all of this erroneously, and you're not making me your enemy. Your enemy is now, going to be a higher power, which has nothing to do with anybody else. How you've chosen to conduct yourself ultimately is what makes you put on or not to what takes place necessarily, so to speak, with God and with Christ and with Christianity. And as Christian believers, I mean, if we're supposed to break bread and then you pray over it and things like that, and break your bread, I mean, how many times have we done that? And what's the face does this really well too. I want to say maybe Napoleon Hill or somebody like that, but to pray over your food before you consume it. And y'all, I'm just so proud of y'all, because I'm really just like stunned right now. I'm floored to this point, because I doubt how often that you'll really see somebody actually taking the time out to heed these type of advices. Like, how rare is that? And so, and then I had other moments, and I was thinking to myself that this is a shame that this is such a positive type of flow that you allow, that you get to experience, that you've chosen to make yourself aware of. That there's beauty in prayer, that prayer helps you recognize that everybody's not as grateful for a meal as they think that they are, that everybody doesn't always really practice kindness towards others. They can't even believe in God. The most positive energy that we can ever experience, people choose to go against the grain as and make their enemies. And then let alone other people. So you can't be kind to people. You can't pray over a meal. You can't help somebody else figure out the things that they have going on. You can't answer the question positively. You can't create things that help a sound resonate. So then it's also like, okay, well, what can you do? You can't spell things that has an appropriate way to figure out our American language, which I'm sure they are really quite sticklers about. Because anything that anybody's created out of nothing, from nothing, is ultimately most likely going to have a certain high esteem held and attached to it, that they'll fight tooth and nail for. And we're not even supposed to be spilling blood to maintain it. So, and I'm not saying to take away from anybody's ability to fight, because God is ultimately nothing except a warrior. That means that God is skilled when it comes to combat, that God has no issue with combating, and that God is unafraid of combat. Okay? So when you think about how God allows us to, that's myself, I'm really like that type of not too shy away from confronting or comfort whatever it causes people to act a certain way, so it causes them to become combative. And so that is where you see less of that at, and more running into figuring something else out. And you know who says a really great quote, and I hate to put this underneath God with a swear word, but I'm gonna do it. Cause he said I ain't never back down or ran from, you know what I mean? And so you put that out in that energy that you are scary. And people are so sensitive. And thank y'all so much for watching. If you're watching, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Make sure you all subscribe. I will see you all later. And you know, I like to open this sometimes with Christ Jesus' name. And when I end it out, I also do the same. So I have learned to actually, and I ran across some great books dealing with my certain faith as well. I ran across Tony Evans. People were actually doing Tony Robbins, and I was like, I had to kind of sort of watch the two authors because they were so similar. But I had been in so many different type of environments where these names were bounced around that I had to begin to pay attention to who's who. Tony Robbins is more of a business minded entrepreneur spirit. And then you have Tony Evans, who is more of a Christianity walker in his spirit that leads some of the small groups or the other biblical thinkers. And then you have Tony Robbins, who also helps deal with some of the entrepreneur issues or thought patterns when it comes to how those people think as entrepreneurs. And so they're different entities, but actually they meet quite well at the crossroads. So I don't think that that's too far out any kind of way to answer this question. And I don't. You know, they're great examples to have as your go-to for this way or go-to for this way. So I love to deal with entities who are great thinkers. Um, I don't mind learning from them. I really have no problems with that. Myself, I'm a devout Christian. I love Christianity. I hate to be the go-to for things in that manner. Like, I think Robin Rihanna Fenty is a great example as an entrepreneur spirit coming from nothing to amass such a great fortune is phenomenal. But I'm not sure what a Christian walk is. That part of her I don't know much about, but I know my own walk, so I'm happy to have that type of example for other people who are curious to learn not just about business, but maybe also a bit more about God. Another thing I will share with you all as well is that as I learned to, because I also had always wished that I had been more around it sooner, more quickly, because it was something that when I realized it, it was just extremely positive. Now I'll say all cookie cutter, no. Um, this is how you have to handle things though. Like there are atheists, there are people who refuse to believe in God, and they are a bit much to deal with. I'll give you an example. I was doing an assignment and I was ready to figure some things out, and I was going back and forth and trudging through to figure out what the most appropriate spaces were that aided in the most kind of sort of pleasantries of what was taking place. And lo and behold, an entity is there, and they gave off these really weird vibes. They gave off these vibes of being extremely unhelpful, which Christians are. People who love and follow God as disciples and want to figure out how to spread the good news and Christ's word to other entities who are more aligned in their curiosity of their spirit to be led to Christ so they can figure out their own goals. And this lady was not having it. I don't know why she was so demon-like or evil possessed and just negative in her thought patterns or whatever else, that it resonated and then it caused something negative to transpire based off energy. And it's almost like they were calling it being telepathic. Your negative mental attitude beings from one person to the next, and it causes adverse reactions instead of ones that are of a benefit. And I just, so I noticed now that and that was weird because as soon as that started to transpire, I had began a certain prayer, and I wanted to begin praying about the way that people spoke to myself and the way that people began to act when they were around myself. And it just so happened that this was the second time now. And then all of a sudden, I started to just get extremely quiet, really quiet, to the point where I just no longer gave like anything else to nobody for a while. I was focused all about me, what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, how fast I wanted to drive, what everybody else was doing while I was around. I was figuring out how they're acting, and I have a daughter in the car. I was figuring out how long I have to go before I reach the destination that I desire, how long before I had to be in a certain space before I was allowed to pop off based off what somebody else did while I was driving. That's all that I cared about at this particular point in time. And that was where I found my own contentment at. I felt really strongly. I believed that I was doing something that was positive, and it did not matter what anybody else was doing. It did not matter whose party was going on. It did not matter what somebody else may have thought about myself out of a spirit of negativity. It didn't matter. It didn't matter anymore. It didn't matter. What mattered most was what I desired. And that was it. That's what brought peace to myself, to my relationship. Am I spoken for? Yes. Do I love who I'm spoken for? Yes. Am I in love with the person I'm spoken for? Yes. Is that the person I want to spend the rest of my life with? Yes. Is that the person who is ownership of me? Yes. Is that the person who owns my body, have sex with? I love doing it to? Yes. All of those questions. Okay. It's not many people. Everybody cannot walk the same walk. This person has really shown a certain type of character. Everybody else has issues. Sometimes my own brain space's mother has an issue, but I'll go to bat with my mama about my spoken for entity, and that's just what it is, and she knows that. People understand this. But see, when it's really intense and serious and a real connection, people have to either bow down, let you pass, and accept it for what has truly taken place, or either they're gonna learn that there's a warrior spirit that's going to come out, and you have awoken it. So you can't blame them. You can only blame you, because now you're considered your own worst enemy. Because you didn't have to do that. You made a conscious choice and decision. So you reap what you sow. And that means what you have sown. That means as you act, you sow. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree. But you are going to recognize and acknowledge it as a fact, a truity of life. And that's where the quiet points begin to permeate as germs that are watered and seeds in your mind. And that's a good thing to have. Nothing's wrong with that. I just joined TikTok, and already I'm like, I like TikTok still. I don't have an issue with TikTok. I don't realize that TikTok is as much work as it is. So I take my time jumping into it. So if you want to follow us on TikTok, you're more than welcome to do that. The TikTok name that you can find on there is probably the same as Antasia Shabria. That's ANTASIA SHAPRIA. Thank you for the like as well. So yeah, I love God as well. I'm grateful that I love God so much so that actually God is the reason why I have the person that I am spoken for now. I really don't believe that if I did not choose to honor and express my own adoration for God the way that I did, that I even may have been as blessed as I was to actually have such a spoken for person. So I have to check my own self, not nobody else at this point in time, in order to even appreciate what God has chosen to allow myself to experience and or to express based off how I conducted myself with God. Okay, so that's first and foremost. It's not about nobody else. And then I'll give you one more before I go. There was another instance where I first realized that and this was probably the strongest strength that I knew that God and I were building a rapport. Our connection grew. And I realized now that I wanted love. I didn't want just anybody's type of love, but I always felt like I had to experience different modes in order to allow God to bring us into this space. And when I cooperate, then 9 times out of 10, all of the outcomes were going to have successful endings. And they did. And so that was really where some of those moments were. So I'm going to encourage you all, if you are trying to figure out your walk with Christ, you're going to need your family member. And I know people are probably just going to flip out, but you do. I'll give you one last example. And the simple fact that loyalty is involved when it comes time to raising a family. Loyalty is what puts you on. So I'll never forget, I just laid in one of my great aunt's bed. Our brand space's owner's great aunt was there for us at this particular point in time. In our great time of need. There was nobody else at that point in time besides, particularly speaking, this particular great aunt. And we were there, and I laid down for the night. And I just had this feeling wash over myself that I knew that God loved me. And I didn't need nobody to tell me that you love. I didn't need, back talk from any human being. Because that was something that was unable to get shaken. And maybe whenever something was, it was going to only be by one certain source. Okay. So, there's your questions to those. Yes, I believe in God. And yes, I have someone that I'm spoken for. So, there you have it.